Hello and happy Wednesday. Today on the Busy Bride podcast, I'm coming to you solo with a bonus fun episode, part 2 of 10 memorable moments from 2024 weddings. There's probably so many more I could get into, but here's another 10 for you because I had so much fun the last time. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome to the Busy Bride podcast. I'm your host, Gabriella Marie, and I created this podcast to help you research vendors and learn valuable advice as you plan the most special and true to you wedding day of your dreams. Let's get started.
Okay, so as a wedding photographer, I feel like I have so many stories to share just because wedding days are so filled with so many different things. There's so many moving parts, and I get home from wedding day and I'm just like rehashing the day in my head and like, wow, so many wonderful things happened, so many crazy things happened. Like, what an insane career to have. A lot of things are funny, some of the things are crises avoided. Some of the things are super duper sweet, but there are definitely standout moments where I can like look back at the wedding galleries I photographed and remember like, oh my gosh, that's right, that happened, or like, whoa, I can't believe that this happened, or oh, can you remember that moment? So I am so excited to share with you even more memorable moments from 2024 weddings, because out of the, I think there was like 23 weddings I photographed this past or last year, I guess now. Welcome to 2025. There's so many amazing moments. So without further ado, let's get into the things I remembered when looking back at my wedding galleries, because that's how I came up with this list. I just looked back at my wedding galleries, and each wedding I was like, oh yeah, that's right, that happened. So, number one memorable moment for me from 2024 weddings for part 2 is at a wedding in the spring at Aldi Mansion. It was during reception entrances. So, all of the other important people for the day entered. The wedding party entered. The parents entered. It was time for the bride and groom entrance. And little behind the scenes for entrances like this, the second shooter and I coordinate where to be so that we get multiple angles, because we don't know when people will do their little thing. Usually when people enter, the wedding party will do like a fun little dance move or something funny, or they'll like kind of throw their hands up. And some people panic and do their thing earlier than they mean to, which means you need to be a different spot to get the photos. And some people wait super long to do things. So like, you just got to be multiple spots to be able to capture all the possible times that people will like, cheer. So the second shooter and I were in our different spots, and we got the bride and groom entering, and they were super smiley, and everybody was cheering. It was a sweet moment. And as they're walking into the dance floor, I'm kind of like walking sideways, to be able to pivot my lens so that I can see them walking. Instead of them walking in towards the guests, I turn around and then photograph them from behind continue walking towards the guest. Essentially, I'm just following them with my camera, right? But I'm walking sideways, my eyes up to my camera. My second shooter is doing the same thing, following the couple with her eye onto her camera, walking sideways. We smash heads. We fully run into each other. Our heads just collide hard as they're entering, as they're getting ready to do their first dance. And we are just like, oh my gosh, are you okay? I think the DJ said something like, watch out where you're going, photographers. And it was like totally fine. We were both okay. It was just a little head bump, but it was very funny that we both had the same shot in mind and would just like move to get there and get the shot. So great minds think alike, I guess. But man, that was hilarious. And it was fine. I already forgot it in a second. And then riding for the first dance. So that was a hilarious moment, just clocking heads with my photographer, my second shooter. Okay, that was number one. Number two is much less traumatic. It's really, really cute. So at another spring wedding I photographed, the bride's dad drove the bride to the ceremony, which is very cute, and then drove the bride and groom after the ceremony to the reception. But they were using this super old Ford car. Like, it looked like one of like the super like old-timey car from like the 20s or something. It was amazing and adorable. They borrowed it from somebody they knew, I think. But the cutest part about this was that her dad brought like a little conductor hat to wear as he drove them around from place to place, and he helped her into and out of the car. And it was the cutest thing. They had like a little "we're married" sign in the back of the car, and then during the ceremony, the wedding party like decorated with stickers and signs. It was so cute. But I just remember her dad like stepping out from around the car with his little hat on and being all with me like, "Oh my gosh, did you bring that specifically for this?" And he did. He planned ahead and got the hat, and I just think that's the cutest thing ever. So that was definitely a memorable moment from this year's weddings or last year's weddings. Okay, memorable moment number 3. This was a crazy fun wedding. Super long day. It was one of like my longest wedding packages that I offer because there's a lot that happened. But this was a wedding that ended with an after party. And usually I don't photograph the after party, but for this wedding, the brides asked me to stay after the reception ended and photograph the after party because they surprised their guests with a drag queen performance. They hired a drag queen to come to their after party at a separate location apart from the reception and do 2 performances. And everybody lost their minds and loved it. And it was like the hit of the night. It was amazing. And the brides loved it too. They were like screaming and cheering and laughing. It was very cool. Especially since I photographed it, I kind of got to be like up close and like see the whole performance. So that was a really cool moment. I don't think I've ever photographed a drag queen at a wedding before. So that was dope. That's number 3. Number 4. This is just like a quick little moment, but I don't know why the vibes like really stick with me. So this was a late summer wedding in Colorado. Um, we had just finished doing bride and groom portraits after um, dinner and toasts. So the only thing left to do was reception. It was right before sunset. We had just finished coming back, or I guess it was around sunset. We're coming back from doing those portraits, and the bride was changing into her reception dress because her wedding dress was gorgeous, but it was a little restrictive for the dance floor, and she wanted to have fun and dance. So she was changing into this gorgeous silk dress that was nice and loose, but she also was wearing these sparkly cowgirl boots with it. And she came out like right at the same time that the groom also came out from the groom suite. And I had talked to the second shooter I had with me before this wedding because she lived out in Colorado and she had photographed at this wedding venue before. And she told me that the mountain that the wedding venue is known for sometimes turns pink at sunset because of the reflection of the light in the clouds. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it turns pink for like a couple minutes. And I noticed that just as the bride and groom were coming back out, the bride with her dress change, the mountain was pink. And I know how fast the sun works. I knew we had like maybe minutes, probably more like seconds left until the sun started fully setting. And so I was like, guys, we gotta get over here. I know you just did portraits, but literally I need like a minute because that's all we have with the pink mountain. Can you please come and take some pictures? And they're like, sure. And so they were full on in party mode already. They kind of like ran over to the spot where I told them to go, and the bride just kind of started dancing, and the groom just like hugged her and scooped her up, and the bride kissed his cheek, and then they kind of danced a little bit more, and then they ran off to the reception. And the mountain was pink in the background for like the whole thing, the whole minute and a half we did that. And I followed them to reception and looked back over my shoulder, and the mountain was no longer pink, like it was gone. So we captured it just as it was like leaving, just as the club was leaving. Perfect timing, and then they went straight into the reception. It was an amazing moment. So that'll definitely not leave me. So that's number 4. Number 5. This one is just kind of funny. So as a photographer, I set up first looks on wedding days. I choose a spot that has good lighting, that looks pretty, and that we're able to like get the bride and groom there or the couple there without them seeing each other. So for this first look, I had chosen a spot with the lighting and the scenario, like I don't know, how it looked good. We'll just go with that. I had the groom standing there, and then the bride came over. And as she came over, I realized that it would be better to do it at another spot, like 20 feet away, like not super far away. But the bride and groom were already there. So I had difficulty figuring out, like, okay, how am I going to move the groom to the spot where the bride is, where I actually want the first look now without him seeing her? So I walked up to the groom. I was like, I need you to trust me right now, and I need you to walk backwards like 20 yards. And he did. And I like held his arm and guided him slowly and carefully walking backwards to the spot where he needed to be for the first look. And it ended up being amazing. But the added part that made it really funny was that there were peanut shells everywhere, and I'm definitely allergic to peanuts. Somebody must have been like feeding the squirrels there, but it was such a pretty spot, and I was like, I need the first look to be here. So I'm just like trampling over all these peanut shells, and I'm just like praying that I don't have a reaction. It was totally fine, and it was okay, and it was just all as well. But that was like an added extra funny moment too, the walking backwards first look. So that was number 5. Number 6. This one was sweet. This was at a late summer wedding in Long Island, New York. Which I didn't know how far away Long Island was. So I learned that. I learned that even though it's in New York and it's next to the city, it takes a long time to get anywhere. So that was a learning moment. But this is a sweet moment. During the vows, they wrote their own vows for their wedding ceremony. The groom started quoting song lyrics in his vows, and everybody started like giggling, like, oh, that's so cute. But then the bride just starts like lip syncing these song lyrics and like dancing to them as he's reading them out loud. And it was really funny because I feel like anytime you say song lyrics and not sing them, it's kind of, I don't know, it's funny. It's just like, oh, that's like a poem, but not a poem. There should be a beat. And it was just really funny that she just started like dancing and lip syncing as he was reading out the lyrics in his vows. So that was a really cute moment that I will remember. Okay, what are we on? 7? Yes, 7. Okay, this one is a disaster averted. So everything ended up being totally fine. So, gotta preface that. But number 7 is when I was hanging up the dress for a picture at a summer wedding. And I always hang up the dress to take a picture of just the dress because it has to have its own moment in a wedding day. You picked it out specifically, like it deserves a picture. So I'm hanging it up, and I notice there is a blue ink mark on the dress. And so first I look around, I'm like, do I have blue ink on me? Like, did I get this on the dress? And I didn't. It was already there. And I covertly brought the maid of honor out, and I was like, do you know where this blue ink came from? It's not supposed to be there, right? And she was like, no, it is not supposed to be there. Do not tell the bride. I don't know what's going on here. And then she thought about it a little bit, and she was like, actually, I think that's from the seamstress. I think I remember her using blue ink to mark where she was going to do her alterations to the dress. I was like, that's not good. So luckily, I have a wedding emergency kit with me at every single wedding. So I whipped that out, and I took out my Tide pen, and I just started going ham with the Tide pen on this dress. And I told the maid of honor, like, go inside, act like everything's normal, and make sure the bride does not look in this direction because I'm working on it and it'll be fine. Just please make sure she doesn't know. So she went back in, acted like everything is normal, and I was scrubbing away at this dress. And luckily, the Tide pen worked, and the ink faded to pretty much nothing, and you couldn't see it at all. And it was also really close to some folds in the dress, so it already was like you almost couldn't see it. But after the Tide pen, it went away completely, and the bride never knew. And I don't know if the maid of honor told her. So that was a crisis averted moment that raised my heart rate incredibly high for a couple minutes, but all is well, and we fixed it. So that was number 7. Number 8 is a funny one too. So number 8, there are some wedding dance floors and receptions where the wedding party just like has a movie moment and lives their absolute best life for the entirety of reception, which I am always here for. I love a good pop and dance floor, makes my day. So this dance floor was one of those dance floors, and the groomsmen had decided throughout the night that they loved lifting people up on the dance floor and kind of like, parading them around, which is all fine and dandy, until it gets a little bit later in the night, and then people, maybe aren't as stable as they were as the reception began. So this was towards the very end of the reception. I was there till the end for this wedding, and the groomsmen lifted up the groom. And I could tell that this groomsman was a little unstable. And so I'm photographing this as it's happening because the groom's up in the air. I got to take pictures of that. And as I'm photographing, I realize the groom is heading my way downwards. And so I'm like, oh crap. So I have my camera in one hand taking pictures. I put my free hand up and I kind of like catch the groom's back as the groomsman lets him down easy. But if I didn't do that, the groom might have fallen into me. So he looked around and turned around and said, thank you. And I was like, you're welcome. And it all ended up being fine. Nobody fell. It was great. So that was another fun wedding story, fun wedding moment where I prevented the groom from falling on me. So that's amazing. Okay. This is another fun reception one, number 9. So I don't know if this is just a Philly thing or if it's just a guy thing in general. But if you know what a shoey is, that is what took place at this wedding. Um, I didn't know that this was going to happen later on at the reception until I was looking back at videos I took from throughout the day. I usually take some iPhone video throughout the day and make a little like real recap video of the day, which I love doing. And as I was making this little real recap video, I noticed that after the ceremony, before we let the wedding party go to do bride and groom portraits, they were all cheersing and I was photographing it. And my video camera was going as I was photographing it. And I didn't hear this at the time, but they were talking about doing a shoey later on in the night. And I was like, oh, that's where it came from. So they were cheersing, talking about doing shoey. Fast forward a couple hours later, it's towards the end of the night, reception's almost over, and the groomsmen get the groom outside and they all do a shoey. And a shoey is when you take your shoe off, you pour beer into it, and then you drink the beer out of your shoe, and then you put your shoe back on, which I think is the worst part of it all. I hate wet socks and soggy shoes. Ugh, sends shivers right through me. So that happened. So I just was grossed out, but also took pictures because the groom's doing shoeies. Got to take pictures. So that was a memorable moment. That was the 9th one that I came up with. And then to end it out, this was a really cool moment. Number 10, this was a city hall elopement slash intimate wedding. They had planned it out and hired me in advance, and their families were there, and they're celebrating with friends later on in the night. They just had a really intimate ceremony in City Hall. So, elopement slash intimate wedding, you can call it whatever you want. But after the ceremony, we'd already taken portraits beforehand. Ceremony happened. We headed up to a different room for a little like cocktail hour reception thing with their family. But we passed by this really cool room on the way upstairs. It had this giant chandelier in the middle, and there was this really beautiful ornate like rug that took up the whole room, and the ceilings were really tall and just had a very elegant look to it. And it turns out the bride told me that they almost considered doing their ceremony in that room, but it was just a little bit too dark to have the ceremony in there, and ended up having it somewhere else. So everybody's kind of like checking out this room, like, oh yeah, that is really pretty. Like it's a cool room. And they all started heading up to the other room upstairs for the reception. And I went up to Molly and John. I was like, can I? Oh, it's their names. I went up to them and I was like, hey, can I take some pictures of you in here? Like, this is such a pretty room. And they're like, oh my gosh, yes, of course. And so I was like, actually, you guys are going to surprise everybody with the first dance, right? And they're like, yes. And I said, well, how don't you practice your first dance here? I'll play the song that you're going to dance to. and practice it in here. And I'm just going to photograph you dancing in this beautiful, elegant room. And they loved the idea. So they did. They practiced their first dance as I played their first dance song on my iPhone. And their dance ended with a lift, and the groom like lifted up the bride and like spun her around in a circle, and it was so freaking beautiful. It was such a sweet moment for them to be able to practice the first dance before they performed it in front of their family members. And it was a cool moment for me to be able to photograph them doing this beautiful dance and lift in a private room that's so beautiful. So it ended up being one of my favorite photos of the year, and it came from a spontaneous moment of just saying like, guys, practice your first dance in here before you go up. It'll take like 2 minutes, and it's such a beautiful room. No reason not to. So that was 1000% a memorable moment from the year, and that is the 10th moment to cap off this episode. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got some tea. I hope you learned something too. I hope you learned to check your dress for blue ink before your wedding day. But we got it. We're good. Everything's fine. I'm still a little PTSD. Um, yeah, hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you're staying warm and filling your face with sunshine as much as you can this winter. We're getting there. We're chugging along, and spring will be here before we know it. So thank you so much for listening. As always, I appreciate your time. Now, go hug your person, and I will see you next Wednesday.